Hello, welcome back to my workshop. Got a bit of a problem. Right, this is my Nearok mill drill. I've got a piece ready to be worked, but at the moment it's not working. When you do this, it's failing to start. You can hand start it. Clearly, that's not convenient, particularly when you've got a cutter in there. It does you can get the motor to start when, let me just show you. If I just set those belts off. Hold on, let me just put the belts off there. If I flip all the belts off, hold on, let me just do that again. It starts but without the kick, so that's not stiff and that's not stiff. Clearly what's going on is the starter's got lazy, there's a problem. I've run a couple of tests with the motor on. Now I'm going to take the motor off. It's a bit awkward, I'm not going to film that, but it basically involves unbolting at the back, put it on a bench, and I'll run through the tests I've done. I'm also just going to take it off complete, so I'm going to unscrew that, and there's one screw that holds this onto this, and then take that off complete. Right, we've got the motor on the bench, but just so that we can see what the problem is, because the motor without anything trying to slow it down does start, this is what it should look like when you try and start it. And this is what it should look like when you put a bit of force trying to stop starting it. Shouldn't really care, okay? That is a 1/2 horsepower Crompton Parkinson, made in the 1960s sometime. I'll put that one out of the way. This, on the other hand, is a GEC, probably made in the 1980s. So if we fire this one up, so this is in a potentially running condition. I pulled some few bits off it. Round, plug that in. Turn it on there, you can see it's just a bit lazy in starting. And if I try and stop it starting, it's quite easy to stop it starting. Okay, so there's the problem. So, tests I've done. First things first. The capacitor sits with two little plastic bits on it. This one is hard to get off. You have to wiggle it backwards and forwards to get it off, and that sits under that cover there. What you do for checking the capacitor generally is a visual check is normally enough. I have actually tested the capacitor and it's absolutely fine. Now the other thing that I've done is I've taken off this shroud here. That goes on, I think, if I recall, no, it doesn't go on like that, I think it goes on like that, and that's just held on by some screws, neither here nor there, and that just covers up the fan. Now we're going to take the fan off. What I've eventually done, so a visual check is enough to check the capacitor. The other thing I tried was putting a known to be good one in. That didn't make any difference. These have a switch on them that either works or it doesn't. Now this is a thermal switch. That can be a problem. Incidentally, I have unplugged it from the mains. So what I've done is I've poked around a bit And I've noticed that, let me see if I, where did I put my torch? There it is, right. So, just put a bit of light on the situation, just in, see if we can see that. Just in there, I'm just going to zoom in. Right angle. You can sort of see, where's that, where did I put that? One connection on the centrifugal switch, and if I just see if I can get that up in the screen at the same time. Oh, that's tricky. Let me just zoom out a little bit. Right, so now if I go and put that on the back of the centrifugal switch and that on the front, quite on the back. There's something like over 3 ohms just across the switch, and that is more than enough to make it lazy to start. You should have a contact resistance of milliohms. So what we're going to do is pull this apart. You will see, if I can get the mains lead out of the way, just in there there's a roll pin. I've got to knock the roll pin out, then undo these, pull it apart. Let's just get that done on the hurry up. I think that's the right size. Find a nice little tinking spanner, a hammer. I don't want a big one. That's a bit too big, I think. Oh, that'll be too big as well. Oh no, that's just got that. No, that's still too big. Okay, we'll go with this one. Okay, let me just... So... Now this one is, if you're playing along at home on a similar thingy, this one is 3/16. Hopefully it's not too tight. Try it from the other side. Oh no, it's partly out that side, we'll definitely do it from this side. Right. What I then want to do is 8mm. This is going to be a pain. And what I'm going to do, before I get this apart too far, is I am just going to put a Sharpie mark across there so that I can line it up easily. Right. This is not going to be fun to line back up, to put these back through. Actually, I don't know, it might be okay. That's catching. Somehow that thread got damaged, I should put that separately. Right. Come on. I'll tell you what we can do. Yes, we can. And those screws that hold the other bit on. There we go. Right, so not going to take that front off as I'd have to make a tool for that, and you're unlikely to be able to do that. So let's look what the problem is. This is currently being held on by that part of the switch. There's a one down below. It seems to be caught on something, caught on that piece of metal there. It shouldn't be, but I think I can wiggle that off. That is the bearing on the shaft. I'm having trouble getting out of the way. So let's just see if I can manoeuvre you into a position where you can see what's a bit better what's going on. You won't be able to see properly what's going on. I'll try and manoeuvre. Let's see if I can't understand why those two are where they are. So I can't see that they should be. That should be. There we go, I've got that freed off down there. So what's that caught on? There we go, right. Now oh, okay, right, so if I push this back in, we can now okay. This centrifugal switch seems to work completely differently to other ones I have come across. Basically what it does is that it pushes on when the motor's stationary and then pulls away when it's not. So what I'm now going to do, so I can pull this out a little bit more, can't get it all the way out because that yoke is still in the way. think you might be able to take it out with luck, but what I can do though is I can at least get in there and clean those contacts. So that's what I'm going to do. Let me see if I can get my diamond files. I might have to come back on. Let me just show you where we're at. So you can see, I'll get my pointy stick out. Just down here is the actual switch contacts. They were being forced closed pretty much all the time. I've now managed to get some dirt on those, so I'll have to get in there and clean that. Right, okay, let me work out how I'm going to do that. You go find my contact clear. Actually, no, I don't need contact cleaning files. I can use a bit of stick. Just get something in there just to give that, brush that crap off. And just pull that back out the way. Yeah, those contacts look like they're a bit messed up. So not particularly clean, but it will do. As awkward as you like. Let's see if I can. What is that putting on now? Oh, okay. Look at that. Oh, I see. Oh, that's interesting. Okay. Right, I'm going to have to get around at these one at a time. Certainly didn't make this easy. That bearing does not slip past the centrifugal switch. Or does it? I might just get it. There we go. Right. So that is said you right. So let me just show you that. Okay, so this is the centrifugal switch here, which is normally pressed closed, and then when it spins up it pulls apart. I'll just show you how that works. Here is the guts of the motor. I need to put these washers back on here. I'll show you that. Okay, so what happens is, it seems, is that when the weights spin and pull out like that, when the weights spin, hold on, let me get my fingers in there, it's quite difficult to show you. It pulls that back, so it pushes that back like that rather than going forward. So that's different to the Compton Parkinson. I'll just have to shove those out of the way in there. Right, okay. So let's give these contacts a clean. It looks like they were being forced closed all the time, and I hope that we're about to find out that hasn't burnt out the coil. So it's only meant to be on for starting. That would be a bit of a blow. Right, well there, that's clean, and that's clean now. So I think we can go for reassembly. Right, I have also put a mark on this shell here. Clean out the dross in there. Oh, that's interesting. That has a, at this end there is a bearing keeper plate there, so that you can't knock this one out without undoing that bearing keeper plate. Let me just show you that. So you can see on this motor there's two screws there, hold on this bearing keeper plate. So this end obviously always gets put together first. So we can start by pushing that in. Oh, that's interesting. Does that go anywhere? No, it doesn't. Okay, it's just a random mark. Hold on. Right, so we now need to manoeuvre that bearing around past this without catching it too badly. That is the problem with this arrangement. There we go, got that round. Now put that through that hole. Those two prongs there, I'm not quite sure what they're for. They are odd. Right, firstly it's fixed, let me show you. And I'll try not to talk over the click of the centrifugal switch. Crucial noise coming up in a sec. Centrifugal switch resetting. Now if I try and start that while holding it, you can tell it doesn't care. So that's good, that's now working. So several missteps on the way. What I'm aiming to do is to show you what the problem was. Did make a whole bunch of washers, turned out not to be of much use, but except in the learning process. So, capacitor was fine, which I did test, but what the problem was, let me show you. Firstly, let me show you how you can take it apart when it's not a huge problem. What you should be doing, but I couldn't do when I first took this motor apart, is pull the pulley end off, which I will show you. I think this has been fiddled with because that originally, when I started taking it apart, was cross-threaded, that particular bolt. Something else I've done is I have put marks on the motor so that I can line it back up when I put it together, so these bolt holes go all the way through, because otherwise they won't go through the stator part. Right, okay. So you should be able to pull that out, which I can, and you hear all. Put that up there. Now the problem I had initially, okay, we'll come and talk about these washers in a sec, was that those are out quite a long way. Those were caught behind there, which in turn was caught behind the bearing, and that meant that I couldn't just pull that out like that, so I had to pull this open to about there and try and fiddle those out. The other problem is this yoke arrangement is a bit naff. The Compton Parkinson has just this bearing. I suspect this might well be because of the horsepower, but you see this bearing here, the yoke doesn't clear that, so when you put this back together again you have to fiddle that yoke apart. Now the next thing you need to pay attention to is how this, let me put this back together the right way, something like that, no, like that. Some more space, just to show you how this switch works. Okay, so you have to get this round there, which is quite hard to do when you put the motor back together again. That will then sit in there, and that sits in quite a long way in there, and that partly compresses that switch, but when you spin the motor up, let me just get you down a little bit closer. Okay, so when the motor spins up, these weights pull out and that comes back. You can see we get a little gap in there. But something that I have noticed is that I've managed to, when you pull the bearing out, you have a habit of catching that contact there, because that should be a bit flatter than that. Let me just push that back in slightly. Okay, the bearing has a habit of catching it when it comes out, like that, and you end up pulling it. So that is really awkward on this motor. And just while I've got it apart, let me see if I can remember where I put that. I'm just going to give that a quick dust clean. In there and in there. Okay, next thing, so that will work when I put it together, provided I don't knock that bearing, knock that switch. Next thing is the washers. Let me just zoom back out so you can see what I'm looking at. Okay, so we have a series of 4 washers. These washers are 2 flat washers and 2 springy washers that are not flat. Now what's crucial about this is that the hole in the not flat washers, you can see the inner racing. You can't on that. So if you put those on next to the bearing, then you are rubbing against the inner race, and if you're rubbing against the inner race, you end up with a stiff shaft. Stiff shafts can be useful sometimes, not in a motor. So you need to be wary of that. So the washers with a small hole go in first, and I put these 2 together so that they have the biggest gap between them. They're springy, or a little bit springy, and we'll just chuck those in there. You need to be careful when you're putting this particular motor together, because of the nature of this yoke here, won't go over this bearing. You do have to fiddle that through. So let's put that back together again. This is a really awkward switch, this one. Much prefer other variations of these switches. Right, let's get that lined up. Push that most of the way through. We can now go through and we can hook one end of the yoke over. And we're going to have to go the other end of the yoke over. We want to avoid, see how difficult it is to get around that switch. There we go, we've got it. You need to be very careful, because where that switch is vital. We can now put that together. We can now stick the bolts back through. And because I've got it lined up, they should just go straight through. I'll say that, let me just... You do need to make sure that you've got it. There we go. Oh, we're slightly out of line. There we go. See, if that switch is not in the right spot, it either will not, it'll be a lazy start, or what you'll get, if you compress that centrifugal switch too much, it won't disengage and you'll get a noise like this. Don't run your motor too long like that, because it's not going to help, and you'll burn the motor out, as well as vibrating it to pieces. Specifically, you'll burn out the starting coil. So it's not built to be permanently engaged. Okay, so up. If you've got everything back together right at this stage, shaft should spin freely, and it does. Should be able to plug it in, switch it on, and it should just go. It does disengage the centrifugal switch. Which it didn't do. Oh, that's interesting. I didn't do that. And I did find right, that's getting lazy again. Let me just check that. Right, okay, give me a sec. Just going to get in there with a torch. Now unfortunately I only have a metal prong device here. Be very careful putting your metal prongs in here because the capacitor is still alive. I'm just going to go and oh no, I don't want to do that. I'll pull it back. See, even taking it apart has pulled that back to a point where it now no longer fully disengages. Try that again. So this is all picky, is no. Right, so I've got it working again. Let me just show you the switch in operation, if I can get that in so that it doesn't interfere too much. You can see there. Turns out that exactly where that is pretty vital, as is the two prongs that go either side. There's a click eventually. There you go. Okay, so that is that now back to working again by pulling that back, getting it just the right distance away. It is really picky, but the other thing is that those two prongs on the either side that prevent that going back too far, it's also vitally important where they go as well. So now what we're going to do is put it back together, which will involve finding all my little screws, and there's quite a few of them. I think those two went in there. Start by putting that on. Just check those are the right screws. One is. Yeah, that's the right screw there. And that's the right screw there. So we can put that back in. We can put this thing back together and get it back on. So you can see this particular arrangement, I don't know why it's quite like it is, but this has got to be the most awkward pain in the neck centrifugal switch I've come across. So I haven't come across one this picky, but the reason why this one is like this is because it's interfered with when you pull the motor apart or put it back together again, and I'm reasonably certain that that's been done to this. Makes it ridiculously picky. As soon as you pull this motor apart, when I first took this motor apart I could only get it parted to a certain distance because it was fouling itself. Right, so now I'm going to put the fan back on. Wrong pliers. So I'm going to line up the roll pin hole. Okay, we've got that lined up. Roll pin is a loose fit in there, but not in there. Probably get the big camera. No, I can't get the big camera in there now. Right, let's drift on. it might have the drifts. It's a pain. Almost all the way through. Right, we now have a fan. Now put the shroud back on. You can hear that clicking in and out. Right, I'll have to find two suitable screws because that's reasonably certain that that's not it, albeit I think they came off. That's definitely not the right screw, but it did come off here. I think this has had a lot of fiddling with, and that's before I got to it, which is probably why it was failing. Right, let's try that now. That's the motor fixed. I'm going to mount it back on the milling machine next. Right, so motor's back installed. Here is the the thing I was originally going to be working on, assuming this worked, part of another video, but it's all back installed and off it runs, starts instantly, which is what it's supposed to do. So that's that fixed. Quite pleased with that. I can now get on with making my next video, which is the centre bolt for shears. So thank you for watching this video. It occurs to me that the problem with that motor is the centrifugal switch bobbin is a small one for smaller motors, and they've just carried on using the same one. So the whole centrifugal switch arrangement gets jammed by the bearing, which is a bit irritating, but there you go. Anyway, as I said, thank you for watching. Please like, share and subscribe.